Hi, I'm Eshaana.
Hi, I'm Ananya, and we are the co hosts of Spaced Out Podcast.
We are extremely excited to introduce to you our new mini series,
Slade in Space. Oh, let's go.
Slay in space, raising the bar, fearless legends, a moving stars. Slay in space.
Ishaana and I are both women in STEM, and as two women in STEM, we are constantly inspired by the trailblazers who paved the way before us.
So, this series celebrates the life of women who have contributed significantly to the fields of astronomy, astrophysics, and science in general.
Our first episode today is about the legendary Vera Rubin, who not only went on to discover the invisible in the universe, but to also uncover the invisible in the institutions of astronomy.
So, let's get into it.
Now, what would you do if you were the first female astronomer permitted into an all-male observatory and there were no women's toilets around?
I don't know. What would you do?
You cut a piece of paper, stick it over the men's sign, and say that now you have a woman's toilet. And that's exactly what Vera Rubin did when she was the first female astronomer admitted into the Palomar Observatory in California.
Slay.
Slate. Now, born in 1928, think Gatsby era America, Vera was born to Eastern European Jewish parents who always looked at education as a bedrock for progress. And when she was 10 years old, she and her family moved to Washington, D.C., and her bedroom faced north. She would always look out at the stars and map the path of meteorites and ask questions like, why is the moon following us home?
Yeah, and even her parents had quite a big role to play in her scientific curiosity. In fact, they were like a middle class family, Eastern European Jewish family. And so for them, they really prioritized education as the bedrock for advancement. And so, her dad and her built like a really janky telescope out of like cardboard, linoleum, and lenses. That was her first telescope. Even her mom, Vera was extremely had a very high level of reading, and she took a note from her mom to the librarian to request to get access to the adult books, which is of 12 years or older, just so she could look into like the cool space and astronomy books.
Now, coming to high school, Vera had a pretty itch with a bee, a bitchy physics teacher who essentially said that there's two types of discoveries that require insight and brilliance. And he would always reference male scientists when talking about this. And then say discoveries that required hard work, but not brilliance. And he would talk about scientists like Marie Curie.
So annoying. But she actually did apply to Vassar College, and when she got her acceptance, she showed it to this annoying physics teacher of hers, and he was like, you'll do okay as long as you don't follow science.
Itch with a bee,
Indeed.
as Lorelai Gilmore would say.
But yeah, so after her high school, she went to Vassar College.
Now, Vassar at the time was an all women's college, and she went on to graduate in 1948 as the only astronomer in her graduating class.
However, she wasn't the only female astronomer to graduate from Vassar. About 100 years ago, Maria Mitchell, who is the first recognized female American astronomer ever, she also graduated from Vassar and actually taught there for a while. So she laid the scientific baseline for Vera Rubin in this college.
Legends, all in all. Now, after her bachelor's, Vera was applying to graduate school and she was interested in the astronomy program at Princeton. However, at the time, they actually wouldn't allow women into their astronomy program, and they didn't allow any women until 26 years later in 1975. Vera did get accepted into Harvard, but she decided to go to Cornell, where her husband-to-be, or husband at the time, he was a graduate physics student there.
Yeah, so her time in Cornell was actually really interesting because she got to study under a lot of visionaries like Hans Bethe, who did a bunch of contributions to stellar evolution.
Ooh, check out our episode on stellar evolution to learn more about that.
And Richard Feynman, Philip Morrison, a whole bunch of really cool Cornell folk. And despite all of these people in their own fields, she was always passionate about observational astronomy.
It's
So
cool.
she stuck to it. She was like, I want to be an astronomer. And she wrote like her master's thesis. And while she submitted it initially to her advisor, and the chairman at the time was looked at it, and he was like, this is interesting. You should submit it to the 1950 AAS, which is the American Astrophysics Journal. You should submit it for their December meeting. However, since you have a new baby on the way, maybe I could give the talk and your like work would come under my name. And she was just like, hell no.
So she went on to actually present this paper at the AAS in Haverford 3 weeks after she'd given birth to her child.
Yep, and it was a snowy day in New York, and through the snowstorm, they kind of her parents picked her husband, and her almost 1 month old newborn, and they drove all the way to Haverford, and they dropped her off at the meeting. And I mean, her father used to say that this snowstorm driving really aged me 20 years. He still insists, but she gave the talk, and after she finished her talk, there were about 10, 15 angry men, and they were all like really triggered at her, and they were like, you cannot do that. And she doesn't really mention in her memoirs exactly why they said that, but I'm pretty sure it could be because, and this is my own interpretation, I think, but it could be firstly because she was a woman, she wasn't an AAS member, and also because the data set on her master's thesis was a little too small. However, there was one guy with a really squeaky voice, Martin Schwarzschild, and he said,
you have the data. Once we have more data, we will know more.
and that kind of gave her that little boost to keep going.
Now, after she completed her graduate studies at Cornell, she moved to Georgetown, where she pursued her PhD. Her husband at the time was working at the Applied Physics Laboratory, and Georgetown offered night classes. So Vera had 2 children. She was doing a PhD at night, and thankfully, she had a very supportive family. Her husband would go pick up her parents, bring them home to take care of the kids. He would then eat dinner in the car, waiting for her to finish her night classes. And she had a sort of whole institution around her that helped her become the legend that she is.
Indeed, really good intellectual support system throughout. And finally, when she was done with her PhD, she submitted an early draft to the Astrophysics Journal, which is one of the journals that she used to read cover to cover all of the time. And when she submitted it, the editor in chief at the time was Subramanian Chandrasekhar. Again, a really cool guy, but his our passion towards him has softened a little bit because of this very incident where he rejected her thesis, her PhD thesis, and said, my doctoral student is also currently working on this, and so wait till he's done, and that's what we're going to publish in the Astrophysical Journal. So he was gatekeeping knowledge from the scientific community because
He wanted his
own-
name on it.
Yeah.
It's with a B. No, we still like him, but
Mhm.
a little bit annoying.
Yes.
Now, after she finished her PhD, Vera continued to work at Georgetown for some time. And it kind of goes to show just the legend that she was. So she was doing some research with a number of her students. And when she put it forward for publication in a journal, the editor was just like, we'll include your name, but not any of the students' name. She declared that she would withdraw the paper if the students' names weren't included. And the editor finally agreed, and all of their names were included. So she was not only, pioneering in science, but really working to uplift the others around her who were working with her.
Yeah, even for like conferences, and when she would write letters of recommendation for her students, she would make sure that the faculty, that the department, in the department where the students were applying for PhDs and stuff, would have females, and she would heavily like protest against going to faculties that were all male. Even for conferences, she would look at like the speaker list, and if there weren't enough women, she'd like call up the conference organizers and be like, there's not enough women on your list, change that. And they did.
Legend. Absolute legend. Then once she met both Margaret and Jeffrey Burbridge, and again, check out Stellar Evolution to learn more about them. They are also a legendary couple in the field of astronomy. And she asked them if she could observe at the McDonald Observatory in Texas.
Yep. And then after that, she grew very close to Margaret Burbridge as well as Jeffrey Burbridge. And Margaret is also another like trailblazer who faced a lot of sexism during her career as well. And finally, while they were having lunch one time, Alan Sandage, we'll give a little more context on him in our graphic, and he offered her, saying that, would you like to be the first woman to observe at the Palomar Observatory?
Now, it was sort of a known secret that during their graduate studies, Margaret used to observe in the Palomar Observatory under her husband's name, but it was all in all a boys' club. So the bathroom story that we started with at the very beginning, that happened at the Palomar Observatory. So on her first day there, it was too cloudy to observe. So she was given a tour of the facility, which ended in her seeing the one and only bathroom, which had men plastered over it. Now, in her second visit, she made it a gender neutral bathroom and was like, women are going to go in here as well. By her third visit, she added warmers into the observatory just to make it a lot more inclusive overall and take it away from being just a boys' club.
Truly a slay.
Slay.
Then we move on to the Department of Terrestrial Magnetism, also another branch in the Carnegie Institute, while she was working with Margaret and Jeffrey. And over there, she met with Kent Ford. Now, Kent Ford is a cool character because he is extremely resourceful. He worked with optical devices and he had built this electric opto device that could measure and take pictures of stars at a much faster time as compared to the traditional exposure methods, which is, you use these photographic plates, you leave them out for like 20 hours and
My
then you get a
goodness.
picture, of the galaxy. Whereas with his, it reduced the time needed by 10, like by a factor of 10.
My
So
goodness.
yeah, what would take about 20 hours now took about 1.5 to 2 hours.
So Vera and Kent worked together for a number of years. They published about 9 papers together in a 3-year period. They spent a lot of time just, driving cold nights and getting a lot of data about different galaxies.
Yep. And basically, one of their main focuses was the Andromeda galaxy. And what they found would shock astronomers, because even though there were observations done before, she just had a huge corpus of data, which kind of brings us back to what Martin Schwarzschild had told her initially with her master's thesis about not having enough data.
You have the data. Once we have more data, we will know more.
They collected a lot of data that pointed towards the aspect of dark matter. Okay, let's start with the definition of what a galaxy is. A galaxy is a cluster of stars that clump together with an extremely dense center. Now, we have always assumed that the way that galaxies and the stars around the galaxies move is similar to how our solar system moves. So the planets that are closer to the sun have a much faster rotational revolutionary period as compared to the planets that are far away. And it's true for our solar system. And that's how it was assumed that, the stars that are closer to the galactic core move faster and the ones that are at the edge move slower. However, thanks to Vera and Kent Ford, they found that the rotational curves are flat, which essentially means that the stars at the edge of the galaxy are also moving at a pretty fast speed. How are they not being slingshotted out?
Yeah.
There has to be something that should obey the laws of physics and allow there to be these stars moving at that speed. That's where dark matter comes in.
That was beautifully explained, I must say. And dark matter, I'll explain my understanding of it. Essentially, it's called dark matter because it's matter that does not interact with light, which is why people hadn't really talked about it all this time. But the math wasn't mathing for why they had these flat rotational curves. And Vera really pioneered increased research in the field of dark matter to improve our understanding of how galaxies form, how they cluster, how they work. And legend, bro.
Yeah, she really slayed.
And all in all, she was an incredible astronomer. And I have some fun facts about Vera that I've jotted down. She not only was a brilliant astronomer, but she was also a super mom. She had 4 children, all of whom went on to get PhDs. 2 geologists, 1 mathematician, and her daughter, just like her, became an astronomer. The first U.S. observatory, also named after a woman, is the Vera C. Rubin Observatory in Chile. There was a satellite named after her in 2020. An area of Mars has been named after her, the Rubin Ridge.
Slay.
NVIDIA in 2024 has a CPU called Vera and a GPU called Rubin. In 2025, they released a US quarter with her face on it. In Star Trek Discovery, you can see the Vera Rubin Nebula, again named after Vera Rubin. And alas, she was featured in Cosmos: A Space-Time Odyssey.
Really, really amazing. And I think she was just known to be a really kind, caring soul, really generous, and such an advocate for just science for young students and women in general. And I think something that really, really like, made me feel very a certain way, like it literally brought tears to my eyes the first time I read this. But this is directly from her like memoir, and it is a letter that she wrote to Margaret Burbridge on her 80th birthday. And it basically says that this is Vera addressing Margaret. You played a different role in the early Rubin household, which I had never before admitted. When I had a distasteful task, perhaps washing the kitchen floor when it had gotten to the state that feet would stick to it, I would say in a very loud voice, "Do you think that Margaret Burbridge is washing the floor?" Then one day, I phoned in California from DC to discuss something, the Equal Rights Amendment, the AAS business. You answered the phone and said, "Can I call you back? Sarah and some friends are here, and I'm in the middle of scrambling an omelette." I hung up with great joy, knowing that you too shared the mundane duties of sisterhood.
The mundane duties of sisterhood. That's fucking beautiful, bro.
Yeah. And then at the end, the end of the letter basically talks about, from you, we have learned that a woman too can rise to great heights as an astronomer, and that it's all right to be charming, gracious, brilliant, and to be concerned for others as we make our way in the world of science. For these and many more talents, we honor you today. Love, Vera.
Love Vera. Slade, she an absolute legend. And I hope you all enjoyed our little mini series about women who slay in space. We've started with Vera, and there's so much more to come. So stay
So many
tuned.
more.
Spaced out! Hey, that was in sync. Let's go. Cut.
Beautiful.
Sled in space.